Let's talk about one of the most brilliant and, frankly, one of the most bizarre minds behind the entire American space program. His name was Jack Parsons. He was a man who helped launch us to the stars, all while secretly leading a controversial magical order. It's a story that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but believe me, it is 100% real.
So you gotta ask yourself, how is it possible for one person to co-found NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and at the exact same time be a devout follower of the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley? This is the core paradox of Jack Parsons. On one hand, you have this brilliant scientist whose inventions were absolutely critical to the US war effort. On the other, he was a sorcerer, convinced he could literally bend reality to his will with ancient rituals.
And this is the man himself, John Jack Parsons. And you know the wildest part? He wasn't a product of some prestigious university. Nope, he was largely self-taught, driven by this childhood obsession with sci-fi and rockets that he started tinkering with right in his own Pasadena backyard. It's an incredible story of raw genius that would change the world before ending in total tragedy.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to go back. Way back. Back to his childhood, where his two great passions first took hold. Science fiction and, well, things that go boom.
So, picture this. Parsons is this wealthy but kind of lonely kid growing up in Pasadena. He's just obsessed. Devouring books by Jules Verne and sci-fi mags. He and his buddy Ed Foreman even had a motto, through hardship to the stars. So they started conducting their own rocket experiments. And we're not talking about little model rockets here. They were using gunpowder, cherry bombs, glue, you name it. Their family's fancy backyard, it was pretty much covered in craters from all their failed launches.
Now you'd think this kind of chaotic, explosive hobby would land you in trouble, right? Well, for Parsons, it landed him at the California Institute of Technology. And even though he didn't have a formal degree, his raw talent was just undeniable. He, Foreman, and another student named Frank Molina formed a little group that the Caltech professors quickly nicknamed the Suicide Squad. And yeah, you can probably guess why.
But this wasn't just some backyard hobby for long. See, the world was heading towards war, and suddenly, Jack's incredibly dangerous experiments were about to become a matter of national security, forging the very foundation of the space age.
So the Suicide Squad actually became an official thing at Caltech. And with World War II looming, the US military got very interested in what they were doing. The big idea? Develop rocket boosters to help heavy military planes take off from short runways. This little government-funded project, well, that would eventually become the world-famous Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. And it worked. It absolutely worked. What you're seeing here is one of the very first successful tests of their jet-assisted takeoff, or JATO units. They proved they could cut takeoff distance by a whopping 30%. That was a huge deal, a real strategic advantage for American aircraft in the war. Okay, but here's where Parsons really changed the game. His single greatest contribution was the fuel itself. Before him, solid fuel rockets were basically just bombs waiting to go off. Super unstable, super dangerous. But Parsons had this incredible breakthrough, using asphalt, of all things, as a binder. And just like that, he created a stable, reliable, powerful solid fuel that you could safely store forever and cast into any shape you needed. I really can't overstate this. This invention changed everything. It wasn't just a minor tweak, it was a total revolution in rocket tech. Parsons, this self-taught guy, solved a problem that the world's best engineers had been stuck on for decades. He single-handedly made solid fuel rockets a practical reality. And you know what? We're still seeing the results of his work today. Every single time you see a picture of the space shuttle launching, those two enormous white solid rocket boosters strapped to the side, they are the direct descendants of the stable, powerful fuel that Jack Parsons cooked up in his lab way back in the 40s. Incredible.
But at the exact same time that he was changing the future of technology, Parsons was going down a completely different path, a secret one. This was a journey into a world of hidden rituals, ancient gods, and a brand new, radical religion. He discovered Thelema. This was a religion created by the notorious British occultist Aleister Crowley. Followers practiced what Crowley called magic, and yeah, that's with a K at the end to distinguish it from stage magic. For Parsons, this wasn't some abstract philosophy. He actually believed that science and magic were two sides of the same coin, and that these rituals could tap into unseen forces that maybe quantum physics would one day explain.
So you can just imagine the kind of double life this guy was leading. It's just wild. By day, he's at the JPL test site, a respected scientist, crunching numbers and mixing dangerous chemicals. But by night, he's a disciple of Aleister Crowley, performing these super elaborate rituals to try and contact otherworldly beings.
And he didn't just dabble in it either. He went all in. He became the leader of the California branch of Crowley's order. He turned his huge Pasadena mansion into a commune for artists, writers, and fellow occultists. It was this bohemian hub where, according to FBI files, they conducted these strange rituals, which reportedly included the use of blood from their own livestock. Yeah, it definitely got him on the FBI's radar as a suspected black magic cult.
For a while, somehow, he managed to keep these two worlds from crashing into each other. But you just knew it couldn't last forever. Something had to give. The rocket scientist and the occult high priest were on a collision course.
And then the walls between his two lives just started to crumble. He would start chanting Aleister Crowley's hymn to Pan, a poem to a pagan god, right before a big rocket test. Can you imagine? And then he started inviting his buttoned-up science colleagues from JPL to his occult ceremonies. You can bet that made things pretty awkward.
Look, his colleagues always thought he was a bit weird, a bit eccentric. But now he just seemed dangerous. This guy was working on top-secret military projects. His occultism was now seen as disreputable, and combined with his notoriously reckless approach to safety, his bosses decided he was a liability they just couldn't afford.
And when he fell hard and fast. It's almost unbelievable. In 1944, just 1 year after JPL is officially founded, Jack Parsons gets fired from the very institutions he helped build. His life just completely unravels. He gets conned out of his entire life savings by a house guest, a then unknown sci-fi writer named L. Ron Hubbard. And then, in 1952, it all came to a sudden, violent end.
His life ended just as it had been lived, in a massive explosion. But the legacy he left behind is just as complex and volatile as the man himself. Parsons died in an explosion in his home laboratory. The official story was an accident, that he dropped a container of some highly volatile chemicals. But come on, given his occult activities and his top-secret government work, theories of suicide or even assassination have swirled ever since.
He was only 37 years old. Think about that. A career that had already revolutionized rocketry and helped lay the groundwork for humanity's journey to the stars was just over.
For decades, his name was basically scrubbed from the history of JPL and the space program, but today he's finally being recognized as one of its most important founding fathers. His legacy is the ultimate paradox, a man whose rational, scientific genius can't be separated from his irrational, spiritual quest.
And all of this really leaves us with a final question. Jack Parsons' story forces us to wonder, how many of the great innovators who pushed humanity forward are walking that same razor's edge, balancing on that incredibly fine line that separates genius from madness?